I wanted to, before I introduce Rabbi Biberfield, we thank for his time and coming special basically just to address our tzibur. I wanted to just perhaps explain from the perspective of a Talmud what the impact of the Mashgiach was on the Olam HaTorah and the Talmidim during his time here, since he arrived in America 27 years ago to be the Mashgiach of Mismedrash Gavoya, that there's mistama, nobody in this tkufa that had a larger impact on the Olam HaTorah than the Mashgiach. There's a lot of Rosh Yeshiva who have Talmidim, but there's very few people that have Talmidim, that the entire Olam HaTorah is their Talmidim. And at the time when the Mashgiach came, the Olam HaTorah was mamish, his tkufa was when the Olam in Lakewood and the Yeshiva was mamish exploding. When I came to Yeshiva, it was 4 years after Mashgiach came, and I came and it was still the one building on 6th Street and Beis Elio, and the dining room was still downstairs in the basement. And during that time is when campuses opened and yeshivas and Bati Medrash, and the enrollment in yeshiva probably went triple, quadruple the amount. And the Mashgiach was the one that gave the Olam the direction, the hashkafa, understanding, and the she'ifis of what it means to be a ben Torah and how to live a life of a ben Torah and a dahaib in a life. He was the only person that everybody wanted to know what he had to say. The Kanoim, the Mater, the Yeshivish, the Mater, everybody wanted to know what the Mashgiach had to say about something, and everybody listened. And I don't know if we have that anymore, that there's one person that his daya is the daya that we want to know what he has to say. You had the Musar from the greatest Bali Musar, Reli Lapyan, and he had from the Stipler, and he had from the Shiva, the Rav Shach, and he was the Bal Masoira, and he gave tremendous amount of direction and she'ifis to the Olam. You know, sometimes a person will say over a Chiddush, like from the Stipler. Kilas Yaakov's amazing Sefer, say over a Chiddush from the Stipler. So I said, what's the Chiddush? Everyone knows that. It's well known. Who do you think made it well known? It was written in the Stipler for 50 years already. That's how it's well known. It's his Chiddush. There's a lot of things that became things that we're accustomed to that were the Mashgiach's Chiddush. It was his ideas. His cook on certain things became the pashtus, how we look at it. So for my 10 plus years I was in yeshiva, I was zoicha to hear basically every shmuz the Mashgiach would give. I learned by him in the house every week, and was makabel many things from the Mashgiach, as were many Talmidim. And what I would like to do, just for a few minutes, is explain from his Torah itself what he taught us and what he demanded of us, and see from certain things what his derech was in teaching and learning in Torah, and what his derech in his anhaga was, and the direction that he gave the Olam HaTorah. And if something I say sounds pashut, then remember the word I said about the stipler. Could be that he made it pashut. So the first thing is that the godless that he had in taking out from the pashtus of Zachim, the pashtus of something, he could take out an unbelievable amkus. Just read it. Just read it. You may have never paid attention to it before, but if you read it, the pashtus, and he would just say over the pashtus, and then it rings. It's like, oh, that's what it's saying. I just thought of this morning. Tefillah, well, for example, is very soides dika inyan, and he used to say, Mashgiach, that it's in the Bria itself, that you cannot get shefa of anything. The Kodesh Baruch Hu is not mashpia to you anything without tefillah. And that's the nature of the world, is that way. And if that's the nature of the world, then l'chor there's a kasha. What about the animal kingdom? How do animals survive? So he said the pasuk says animals have to daven animals have to daven also. We said this morning. It says in the pasuk, "Kfirim shayagim lataref, ulevakesh me'el ochlam." Kfirim, lions, mevakshim, they try to find food, ulevakesh, and to ask from Hashem ochlam. So he said the pasuk is telling you that when a lion is roaring after the animal, he's davening to Hashem, give me atzlacha that I should succeed in capturing the animal. It's mafurish in the pasuk, levakesh, that an animal also has to daven. And from there, you see the clarity of what tefillah is, and you don't have to do more than read the pasuk, or hear the mashgiach tell you that that's what the pasuk is saying. He would always tell us that the pashtus of the Chazal means exactly what it says. And he would demand that a person should live based on exactly what Chazal are telling you. If Chazal say, you're not going to do it, and he would mon the oilam, you don't believe in what Chazal are saying. Chazal are saying it, you have to believe it. And if Chazal said it, it means what it says. So how could you not do it? Whatever Chazal would tell you, that's exactly what they're saying. And how could you not do it? If you're not doing it, it's kimat b'geder kfira. You don't believe what Chazal are saying. He would find for every matziv. The other thing was another nakuda was that we learned was that no matter what is going on in the world, you have to find what the Torah has to say about it. And there was a godless in being able to find exactly what the Torah has to say about every single matziv. For sure, in current events and world and what was going on in the world, and he used to say that the chelik of the hashgacha pratis of something is if you heard about it. Not just that it happened. It happened as hashgacha pratis for the people that it happened to. And the people that heard about it, it's hashgacha pratis that you heard about it. It's not muchach that you should have heard about it. If you heard about it, there's a hashgacha pratis on that also. And therefore, you have to learn it up and you have to understand it. Remember, after a maisa that happened in the yeshiva, there was a maisa that there was some noises, and then all of a sudden everyone thought that there was some attack, chas v'shalom, something going on, and everyone ran out. Everyone started running out of a base manager. Basically, everyone started running out, and people started trampling over each other. And the maisa was nothing had happened. So you say, okay, nothing happened. Good, Baruch Hashem. So he said in the shmuz that in the Teichacha it says, "V'nastem ve'ein roidef." V'nastem ve'ein roidef. So what's the problem? Ein roidef. No, instilling fear is an einish also. instilling fear in somebody for nothing is also an einish. It's a chelik of the teichacha. It's not that it's good for telling you this. There was a ma'isa once, a horrible tragedy, that there was a bacher that was nifter in the Beis Medrash. It was late at night, and was nifter in the Beis Medrash. And he said over, the Mashgiach spoke, and he said from the Ramban in Parshas Lech Lecha, that the Ramban says, "B'mokam hamishpat shama haresha," that a chelik of the hanhaga of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is where something happens. It's not just what happens; it's where it's happening, and that's a chelik of the midah keneged midah. The Ramban says, and therefore, if it happened in the Beis Medrash, then b'stamah there's a problem in the Beis Medrash, and from there, all the signs that are in the Beis Medrash, no cell phones allowed in the Beis Medrash, all came from that he made a takana there at that shmuz, that there should be no Beis, that there has to be a tikkun in the Beis Medrash, that if this happens in the Beis Medrash, then the Ramban is telling us that this is the Ashkacha Pratis. In other words, Chazal are not just saying things for no reason. Chazal are teaching us how to live life, how to look at life, and how to take out something from every situation. And this is over and over again. Before it was popular to speak about all the Torah of Yishmael, he was mechadish a lot of that. Those inyanim. I was there right after the 9/11 and all that. There's a lot of Torah in Yishmael, and all these types of things. Now, there's a whole other area that he taught was the hanhaga of a ben Torah. And the hanhaga of a ben Torah, first of all, his hanhaga of a ben Torah demanded a certain dehoibenkeit, a certain refinement, how a ben Torah is supposed to act. And it was in many, many areas that he demanded and he taught the high level of hanhaga of a Baal Musar. Whether it was inyanim had to do, and it was all from Chazal, and he was teaching it to us in the inyanim of kedusha, in the inyanim of tznius. The famous Chavetz Chaim, that Chavetz Chaim says, if there's Ervas Davar, then that's where the Machanecha is not Kadosh, V'shav Machrecha, the Shechina leaves. This is a very well-known thing, but I think when he said it was not very well-known, that the Chavetz Chaim says that when there's a Chesaron of Tznius, the Shechina leaves Klal Yisrael. And I don't think it was well-known, because after that shmuz, they passed out papers of the Chavetz Chaim in yeshiva. This is the words of the Chavetz Chaim that the Mashgiach spoke out last night, and it was a whole big tumult about this Chavetz Chaim. I think it's very well known now, but I don't think it was well known then. And the Indian that became also last year in Term Musar Convention, they spoke about the cheshivas of ladies, teachers, moras, and how important it is that we should get them to be machshiv what the ladies do and teach. And he darshan about this 16 years ago in yeshiva. No one really listened then. And I remember the whole shmuz, and it was word for word the shmuz that was given now, 16 years ago, that he had already spoken about this, that if we don't treat the moras properly, there's no one's going to want to be moras, and no one's going to be teachers. And he was very strict, he held a very high, he demanded a very high level of kedusha that he held was b'sakona if a person's not going to be in the proper atmosphere. And he would speak about that. He spoke about what does a person do to get entertainment? A ben Torah. Entertainment, he didn't like that whole idea. And he had a Gemara. Gemara says, Asher ha'isha shaloi holach b'atzas v'shoim ki b'tzaras Hashem cheftzoi. So a person goes and ha'ilach le'tztadinin u'lecharkom to go watch different interesting things, etc. And he says, Chazal say you shouldn't do these things. Go to theaters and go to what he called the circuses and these things. Why? And he said, why mevi'in lidei bittul Torah? It is bittul Torah. Why does the Gemara say dvar malolo mevi'in lidei bittul Torah? And he said that what a ben Torah has to be afraid of is not going to these things. Sometimes a person has to relax. They can't be pushed. They need time. So it's not bittul Torah to relax, to appreciate something, to go something, do something. But when a person goes to something that takes over their mind, so it's mevi'in lidei bittul Torah, because even when he's finished, he's mekusher with that thing. He's going to be thinking about it. I didn't know when I heard the shmuz that I was going to be saying it over in Florida, but I remember the shmuz. He says, well, you take your child to Disneyland, and then what's going to happen when they come back to the cheder? They had a good time, good, but they come back to cheder, they're going to be thinking about Mickey Mouse. You're connecting them to something else. You're being connected to something else. It's not enough. Yeah, you have to sometimes go enjoy, but to create and foster an interest in something else, foster yourself a connection to something else. It's not just the time that you spent. It's mevi'in lidei bittul Torah. So he demanded a certain hanhaga, the haimenkeit tznius, how a person spends their time, what a person's interested in. And this is how a ben Torah lives, and this is how a ben Torah acts. His understanding of Yomim Tovim and to take advantage of the time. The famous Mesiba by Purim by night that now all yeshivas have. Every yeshiva they Purim night, Sidrei Limud. This was not the case until he was machadish this musig that we have to the Zmanim are Kodesh when Yom Kippur. We try to learn a little bit from that also. And Chol HaMoed he would talk about the Zmanim, how again the haimenkeit of a ben Torah, how he can to live. These are all brand new musagim, and he was machadish that, and he taught it, and he lived it as a refined person, and he demanded all this from the olam. And this is what and of course it goes without saying, the internet where he saw that which other people didn't see, the danger. So that's what I was saying before, that during that kufa that he had the ear of the whole Olam HaTorah, and he brought up the musagim of everybody to understand these things that nobody would talk about, and nobody demanded, and no one elevated the Olam the same way. So the hashpah that he had on the Yechidim, the Talmidim, and the whole Olam HaTorah is ein kedugmasoi, in the way he taught it, in the way he lived it, and the example that he set. And by discussing it, we should be zeicha maybe to grow in our emunah, grow in our musar, in our hanhaga. And the most important, Yisrael Hashem b'cha espar, he would always say, the pride of a ben Torah, to understand that we're the legion of Kadosh Baruch Hu, we're the ones that Kadosh Baruch Hu is proud of. We should continue to be proud of being a ben Torah, and to continue steiging in the way that the Mashkiach taught and elevated us all. As Hashem, it should be an ilui for his neshama. As a close talmid of the yeshiva, it's a big kavod to call on Rabbi Biberfield to give a perspective of a talmid.
Rishus Yedidi, Rish Kollel Shlita, Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi, Rishus my Shver Shlita, the whole tzibur here. Before I comment on what Rabbi Blezer said in his beautiful words, just be makdim the Gemara. Gemara tells us, Agra de Hespeda Deluya. Agra de Hespeda Deluya. The schar that one gets for giving a hesped is Deluya. Rashi of an art learns Deluya means to bring out bechi, to bring out emotions from the tzibur. And the Reshiva Baron in the Sefer brings another pshat. Deluya is from the lashon of doile. To be doile, as we know, doile umashke. L'chera, both bechinas are correct. Just depends on the circumstance. B'shor shemeise muta lefonov. That's the time that Rashi is saying you have to bring out bechi. That's the time when the hesped is really from the heart. It's an emotional experience. But then after the kvura, when we're trying to gather together to try to gain insight and perspective, to try to learn from the grace and nifter, at that time it's already a bechina coming really from more of an intellectual perspective, to be doile umashke miteirosei shel Rabbeinu Agadol, and hopefully la'acherim. And in that vein, I must openly compliment the Rish Kollel for his words. I could be made that indeed everything that Rabbi Blezer said over, it's so true. And he was one of those gewaldige Talmidim that shept so much from the Mashgiach Zatzal. To continue along in a similar idea, to open it up a little bit, to branch out, to see what we could take away. The truth is, the Mashgiach Zatzal was a Gavra Rabbah. It's Enke Dugmasai, Mi Yidin Lanu Tumurasai. We don't have someone like that. It's hard to even imagine that we'll have Bizoichet to have someone like that again. He was a person who the Gedolim already saw greatness in him. As he once told me that he used to go into Rav Shach often, when Rav Shach would tell him, Matisyahu, bleib da. You stay here. All this dozens of people coming through with all of their issues and their questions and the eitzes that they needed and the brachas that they were requesting. He said, Matisyahu, bleib da. You stay here. He knew this is a person, he needs shimush from Moran Rav Shach. And it repeated itself by Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, where he told the Mashgiach, you stay here. While people were coming in and asking Rabbi Yaakov his eitzah, his bichas, he says, you stay here. He was a younger man. He was a young man at that time. But they saw the godless. They saw how great he already was and the potential that he's going to be a Manigador. Indeed, one of the many espedim that he gave for Rav Shach Zatzal, he gave in Lakewood, he gave in New York, he gave in Lakewood Minyan, in Tamim, in Tarvadas. He went all over the place. They flew him out to Bnei Brak to give a hesped on Rav Shach. And in one hesped he described Rav Shach, that Rav Shach was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Dor. Zoy Semeris, there are yeshivas and the Rosh Yeshiva. And each Rosh Yeshiva has to worry about his Talmidim, the development of the Talmidim, the steiging of the Talmidim. That's his job, Avada. Rosh Yeshivas who have a lot to do with the Talmidim, then even after the Talmidim leave the Yeshiva, they move on, they get married, they still come back to be Shayaletza. But that's their cadre of people that they're dealing with. A Rosh Yeshiva V'dor means that he's dealing not only with his Talmidim, not only with his Yeshiva, but he's dealing with all B'nai Yeshivas, all B'nai Torah. And that's Taka, what captured the heart of Rav Shach Zatzal. He was worried and he was concerned about the welfare of the steiging of all B'nai Torah. And that's what we could say about the Mashiach Zatzal. He was a Mashgiach of the Dor. He wasn't only a Mashgiach in Lakewood And only because Lakewood, obviously before that in Gateshead, but only because Lakewood is the great center of Torah that it is. As Rabbi Bleja mentioned, that so many people flocked to hear him from all different places. And he went and he traveled. But one reason is because he had the concern of every Ben Torah, Befrat the B'nai Torah, the B'nai Yeshiva, and whatever he can do for Klal Yisrael. And it was both the Yochid and it was both the Tzibur. As a Dugma L'Dover, someone once came to the Matisyahu Rebbe and needed a yeshiva for his son. His son couldn't stay in America anymore. He had to go learn abroad. Where should he go to? So the Matisyahu Rebbe told him, you have to leave America. I would say you should go to Gateshead. Why Gateshead? I had one interaction with the mashkiach of Gateshead. I was very impressed. That's where you should go learn. What was the interaction? Matisyahu Kakoya. There was a bacher in the yeshiva who had to leave the yeshiva. Now, Anola felt he can't stay in the yeshiva anymore. But Matisyahu Zatzal, he felt he didn't want to just call him the bacher and say, Herzog, you can't stay here anymore. So he thought, how could he save face for this bacher? So he found out, who is this bacher close to? He came from a Hasidic family, this bacher. Happens to be was close with the Matisyahu Rebbe. So a few weeks later, this bacher was going back to America. So Matisyahu phoned the Rebbe and said, do me a favor, when this bacher is coming home, he's going to come, I've had to come into the Rebbe to say Shalom Aleichem, ask him where he's learning, what he's doing. Tell him that Gates is not a good yeshiva for him. He should leave the yeshiva. So the Rebbe said, well, I'm going to tell him he's going to go onto the street. So no, tell him he should come speak to the mashkiach of the yeshiva. He'll find an eighth of him already. And Kachava, that's what he did. The Rebbe told him, Gates is not such a good place for you. He came back to the yeshiva, went into the Matisyahu. He says, okay, I say, all right, we'll find a different place for you. And the bacher never knew that he was kicked out of the yeshiva. Mitzad Sheni, fast forward many years, the great event at Cityfield. And after come out a year of putting tremendous koiches into just getting the event to be, there was a lot of opposition against the idea, how much it's going to cost, if it should be done, how it should be done. Tremendous amount of opposition. But the mashkiach persevered. He went through with it. And finally the day came, and at that time he was in a walker. He was using a walker. And he's coming into the event, and his oldest son, Rabbi Yaakov Yehuda, says, Daddy, what are you feeling right now? What's going through your mind? And Matisyahu Zatzal answered, he says, I'm hoping that there'll be at least enough of a Kiddush Hashem from this Maimed that'll be a kapora for all of the Bokrim was a Shayna Rabkofalin with technology. That's what he was hoping for. That at least it would be able to maybe pull them out a little bit. That's what his heart possessed. His heart was captured with the Yochid and with the Rabbim. And he was a mashkiach of the Dor because he understood the Dor. Many times a person from a previous generation has different ideas, sees things differently, but he had such a finger on the pulse to know what Americana Bokrim need, Americana Jungalite need. He had such a pichus to know how to say things. I mentioned this in a different occasion, that he told me once, if he has, when he came to Lakewood, and he's working on a certain Indian. The Indian I remember now was the whole sugi of an alovim and an olvin, shomin cherpasim, vein meshivin, gedenkst us. When did those shmuzim come about? I only know it because I was going through a Shveret Kufa at some point in time, And I felt I was having redifus. So it always, like the Rambam says, better be the nirduf. Be the nirduf. Best to go away. So I spoke it over the Mashiach Zatzal. Efshet should just be the nirduf. Maybe I should walk away. And I made reference to the shmuzin, that whole maracha. A shmuz wasn't just one shmuz, and we're going to deal with this topic this week. It was a build-up from one week to the next. And you got a full picture of the Inyan. So the Matisyahu told me then, he says, those shmuzin he worked on in Gateshead, in the Tekufa, that Taka, he was being, someone was being raided him, Taka. He felt like the nirdif. And how did he deal with that situation? He went into the Inyan. Be'ina ba'omek. He went into the Inyan. But that's a Gemara in a few places. And I love in the Elam, that's a Gemara in a few places. But he used the Rambam as the platform to develop the Inyan. So he explained to me, he says, why did he do that? And in general, he said, if you find something in a medrash, l'mazogin, a medrash says, stay in the medrash, Divrei Chazal, Emislam Bitoy. But also the Rambam said it. He says, I would use it from the Rambam. A medrash, people could say, well, the medrash, I'm not sure. Sometimes they're agoda, something's allegorical, you never know. It's a local amaisa. A Rambam, steht in Rambam azay, there's everything a local amaisa. The Pichis, he knew where to say things from, or when not to say things. You know what it's like to be a good speaker, that everybody wants to hear you, and you take your speech and you take out 3/4 of it? Knowing about that film? I'll tell you what he told me once. It was once by a shiva. He was sitting shiva for his sister. There wasn't a lot of people coming to me. Menachem 11, it was a little bit, he was talking a little bit slower than. So I went to Menachem Oval, and I didn't know his sister, and figured I could talk about other things. So I asked him on this Inyan about going to speak places. It's mamish l'shem shamayim. Shem shamayim could be murder people. But that Inyan, the Proteus, doesn't matter what I ask him exactly. So he says, it's true, but mevest. Anytime you speak, there's always l'shem shamayim mefavtos. That's pashut. And he knew that, and that's what made him so effective. Because if we could say this, he was an amala mensch. You could talk about all different things, and he related to the person on that person's level. But he went through the same zach. He knew all the mishagasin that the Yetzirah takes us up with. He knew it all, but he dealt with it. But yet, times, the city field of Ed was a prime example of that. He was the one who was the miyasid of it all. He took along the Sklana Rebbe to be the shutef, and to get that whole Chassidish kreis involved also. But Lamai Cigarette, it went on. If you can imagine, there were a lot of speeches over there, and not everybody went mamish to the time that they were given. So by the time the Mashkiach Zatzal's time came to speak, which he said he's going to be the last speaker, he has to let everybody else speak. It was mamish very late. He took his speech and mamish cut out 3/4 of the speech. He said one zaf, the shalah, the tefillah of the shalah, and I've tried to tell the truth to the Sefer HaChinuch. He had prepared a whole drosha for the 40,000 people that were there. Everything, they didn't have extraneous things. Everything that he felt the Ilm has to hear in this Maimed. But not by the tzibur. At other times, very often in the shmuz, he would go overtime. Because he was developing a thought, and it came the time, he said, Schuldigs, we get the Rebbe the Zeit, but this is a wichtige Nekude. He apologized, but he said, we have to go weiter. He knew the time to do that, but at that time, at Tzibur, he felt it's not the right time, that's it. He's cutting out his drasha. what the Mashiach meant to those who were zeicha to gain from him. And it's certainly not the same anymore. It's part of the reason why we're gathering to be maspid. And it's a pella how many haspedim there are, how many people were affected. Ibn der Welt. In America, versteht sich, in England, in Eretz Yisrael, tens of thousands of people came to the Levaya, and there's haspedim going on. And we realized, Taka, his broad reach, he was the mashkiach of the ganze Dor. And people are feeling that. But to give over what he meant to the Talmidim and how he affected it, this is really what the Reish Kollel Shlita was sharing with us before. That he changed a perspective of a whole Dor. He changed our perspective, the way we look at things, the way we approach a Shabbos and a Yom Tiv. As a dugma, to give another example, he used to say, there's something that we say every Friday night. I think Nusach Sfard and Nusach Ashkenaz say this thing, both say it. If the Shemona Esrei and Leil Shabbos, in the Mogen Ovos, we end about talking about Shabbos. What is it? What are we? We're an Am Medushnei Oineg. They gave La'am Medushnei Oineg. So most of us, Taka, never really thought what those words mean. What does that mean, Taka? And that's what he used to do. He used to mamish taichverta. He used to just translate the words. He says, we're an Am Medushne, we're a nation that's saturated with pleasure. We need to find pleasure other places. We have a Shabbos Kodesh. The problem is we think, well, it must be not Lamaisa because I don't feel it from a Shabbos. The problem is not with the La'am Medushne Einek Zog. The problem is with us. That we don't realize this is Divrei Chazal, and by him it was klar. Every word of Chazal was emes la'amitay. And when it was emes la'amitay, he was able to give it over with such a conviction, with such a boldness. This is Divrei Chazal. It's to be taken literally. We're an Am Medushnei Einek. But he understood also that he can't take things for granted. I don't even think because he did his homework before he came to Lakewood after his tenure in Gateshead, said, well, let's see what this Eilam knows. He understood this is what people have to hear. Poshet, Taichverte. Remember when he started his Vadim, all different topics. When he started his Vadim, and Amurun B'Tochen, before learning either Shara B'Tochen in Chavis Avavis, or the Vadim B'Yonei Amurun B'Tochen. He says, first we have to translate the words. What is Emunah? What is B'Tochen? You have the faith, belief, trust, it. What are the words? What do the words mean? And we're not talking about an art scroll taich. He said very often, art scroll. He make a spiel with that. When he wanted to develop and explain something, he said, well, let's see, but what does the art scroll say? The art scroll can only give one word. There's only a certain amount of space on the page. You can put one word. Baruch, he said, Baruch, blessed. Blessed art thou. Blessed, what does blessed mean? What does to know what Baruch means? Develop it. What the Rashba explained the Sefer HaChinuch, what it means. But in English, explain it. Emunah. What does Emunah mean, Taka? What does B'Tochen mean? The difference between them, the faith and trust, what the chiluk is. But he didn't take it for granted. In a vad, particularly sometimes in a shmuz, you're reading a portion to Rashi. A Rashi, you give it over to elementary school. And he's talking to Choshvi Young Light. You would translate the words. Read the words, translate it, what it means. Oh, okay. Now that's ground zero. Now we can start developing it. First we have to know Vashteit. And that's what he did with everything. He did that with a Shabbos, he did that with a Yom Tiv. Maybe we could say it over like this. In what he meant to us Talmidim Talmidim in Lakewood, and those who were zeicher to hear him. His name was Matisyahu Chaim. And the Svarim and the Shmuzin, a Matnas Chaim. There's also Svarim and the Vadim, that's Matnas Chelkoi. Matnas Chaim. And that was his life. His whole life was a Matnas Chaim. His whole life was just a matana to others. He didn't ask for anything in return. He didn't ask for guilt. He didn't ask for covet. He didn't ask. It's one thing he was very makbid about. In Rabbeinu Yona's state, there's an Isser v'lo sirde boi beforech. By an Eved Ivri, something that someone who has authority over somebody else, and if you ask the person to do you a favor, he can't say no because of your lordship over him. You're not. Rabbeinu Yona says the lav in the Torah. He says, I'm very careful about that. Ich bin der Mashgiach at the yeshiva. So I'm very careful about asking people for a ride or getting him something. He's very careful. He doesn't really ever on that lav. And he didn't ask for things. When did he ask for something? He came to Philadelphia. We were zeicher 3 times to have him in Philadelphia to speak on behalf of the Kollel. So one time I'm walking him out to the car. I said, Rebbe, that was a gewaldige talk, mamish ta'olam. So uplifted, they loved it. It was mamish beautiful. He says, okay, now you have your job. Call the Rebbetzin and tell her it was a good shmuz. And he did the Keseda. Keseda did that. And this I didn't hear from him, but someone said over that he explained that once. He says, this is Ishteki Gufay. We're one unit. So the Rebbetzin and him are one. If I said a good shmuz, then she said a good shmuz. She has to know about it also. So gewaldige Meise along those lines, just Santa Meise. When the Rogish of a Goyin was nifter, so there was a shtickle din Torah between the Kehila that he was the Rav over. He was the Rav over the Hasidic part of Dvinsk. Dvinsk may be even smaller than North Miami Beach. And the Hasidic Oilam of Dvinsk was even smaller than that. So really his salary should have been commensurate to the size of the population of the Kehila. But since he was the Ragach of a Goyin, he was such a Goyin, so Taka, his salary was much greater. Now that he was Nifter, so the B'nai Kehila said, okay, that's when the Ragach of a Goyin, well, he was here and we had from him. But his Rebbe said about it, there's a certain fund that they give the Almana of the Rav, but like anyone else, any other Rav. And they came to a Din Torah, and they kicked it up all the way to the Supreme Court. They came to Reb Chaim Meiser. And Reb Chaim Meiser says, not such a shaila. Eishes chaver kechaver, it's like you still have the Ragach of a guy. She gets the same salary as they were getting till now. And the Mashgiach Zatzal, that's the way he lived. And his ganze life was a matana. He gave away his time. He took mamish just enough time that he needed to rest up, to take a breather, to go weiter. That's what he took. More than that, there was no couch in his house. No couch. He had just one big dining room. It was filled, packed by Vadim, by Friday night Chumash, Motzei Shabbos Chumash, Vadim during the week. Purim, as you mentioned. There was no couch. There was no time just to rest on an easy chair. He was always giving. He was giving and giving. It was one big matana. And what was he giving? He was giving Chaim. He gave us Torah's Chaim. He uplifted us in Torah. He gave us Hashkofas HaChaim. He taught us that the mitzvahs that we do it so, mitzvahs hanoshim alumada. He brought it to life. He brought everything to life. He gave of himself, and he had developed really the time he had in Gateshead 25, 30 years that he was engaged, said he developed all of these yesaidas, all of these shmuzin. By the time he gave to Lakewood, he was so busy with so many other things, with the tzrachim, and the yochid, the klal. But he had all of the yesaidas. And he gave it. His whole life was a matnas chayim. And some of the thing that he gave over most, the topic that he talked about most, was Amunah. By him, everything was the Bari Olam. Everything was the Bari Olam. And he gave over Amunah with a chlorkite. And that's Chiyas, v'tzadik be'emunah se'yichya. How else do you live without Amunah? V'tzadik be'emunah se'yichya. There's a lot more to say, but we have to keep to the time. We're not here just to bring out godless of the Mashgiach Zatzal, which that in itself, its own right, is an important task to do. It's the Kavod HaTorah demands it. But just to perhaps mention one idea that we could talk about doila. Agr despay the deluya, to take something away that's lamaisa. Is godless in his Torah, in his chidushim, in the way he analyzed Divrei, Rishonim, and Chazal. It's probably beyond us. But there's one thing that we find personally, that from studying and listening and having such a close kesher for so many years, that always one thing that ran through everything, which is taka shayach to everybody, that's his menuchas hanefesh. He had unbelievable menuchas hanefesh. Not flustered, not phased. Remember, after a Shabbos in the house, Shabbos is relaxing, zmiris, leicht. Once already he came back from Ma'ariv, ready to make Havdalah, Shoin. Ma'ariv in Yeshiva is 72, then he comes home, the phone was already ringing. Both lines are ringing, knocks at the door already, this appointment coming, the next appointment coming. A flurry of activity starting, that's it, the week is beginning, let's go. Havdalah, slow Havdalah. Havdalah the same way, even Havdalah, same way Kiddush was on Friday night. Finish Havdalah, escalation in there, everything there. And then we move on, whatever has to be taken care of. The night is yet young, it would go into many hours into the night. But but it's more than that. It's not stam in hanhoga. Simcha Zisel, I'll just give you a maramokim, it's kedai to look it up, the Chelek Aleph of Chochma Musar. He has two maimorim menuchas hanefesh. Simcha Zisel. And he says it's klil kol hamaylos. But it's not only stam in the anhoga of the way the person walks, but it's bedaitoi. Has to have menuchas hanefesh in his das. And that menuchas hanefesh by the Mashgiach Zatzal was, I think, his ability to zero in on every issue that was at hand. Whether it was a personal issue by somebody, he was able to just sift through, move away all of the tuffle and get to the ikr. He was able to zero in and hone in on what the nekuda is because of his clarity of mind. And particularly, like Simcha Zisel says, the Maimer HaChacham ein pizur ke pizur hanefesh v'ein menucha ke menuchas hanefesh. No greater mile, says, the menuchas hanefesh, to have things clear in the mind. And that's why he was able to draw out from the tremendous bekiyas that he had, the Rechazal and the Yesodis, the Rishonim and the Balei Musar. He had it all. It was all in a compartment, all clear by him. When I asked the Mashiach Zatzal once, I said, how does the Mashiach always have this Yad D'Shmaya, always say the right thing? At a current event thing, a hesped for some person, a bamis, always mamish the right thing. So he said in all honesty, he says that the shaila is really not what to say. The shaila is what not to say. And this tarti mashma, you say, he had so much there. Just had to pull out what had to be said. and what not to say. Tremendous menuchas hanefesh. That Reb Simcha Zilsel says is such an important mila by a person. Eichla yosim ha'odam kol amoloi al amida shemenuchas hanefesh. How could a person not? How could a person not take time to learn menuchas hanefesh? To be calm about situations, to be calm in different stages in life. Avada menuchas hanefesh comes from a deep and klar emunah. The person lives with the Beirei Olam, that it's not keichi v'etzim yodi, it's not me, it's not that I do anything, it's all the Beirei Olam doing it. When that's so klar, that then translates into menuchas hanefesh. When he first started walking with his walker, I was there for a Shabbos, and I needed a sefer. I needed a certain maramokum, and he was in his office. And in his office, he has adjacent to his office another room, and he had more svarim over there, boxes of svarim on the floor, and svarim shang. He says, on the third shelf over there, you'll find this a kuzari. You'll find it over there. I went into the room. It was Friday night. Maybe it was a little dark. I couldn't find it. So I said, Mashki, I can't find it. He said, Yechiel, come, help me up. Help him up from the chair. Gets on his walker, hobbles over to the other room, looks, someone moved around the svarim. Okay, it's not there. The problem was he was now a little stuck because there were boxes of svarim around, and he had this. I said he was having trouble. I said I'll move this svarim away. He says, "Name." He says, I have to learn how to walk with this thing. That's my avodah now. So painstakingly did, back, forth, finished. He said, pretty good for a 3-point turn. That's what he says. He accepted every matzav. This is the matzav. Ad kedei kach, the walker sadly developed into a wheelchair until the point that that's what he was going to be in a wheelchair. And Rabbi Yaakov Yehuda's son once came to him and says, Daddy, how are you so besimcha? You came to America for 20 years. You're running here, being taken over here, driven over here to New York and to other places and flying to places and speaking at every event. Your marbitz Torah, tremendous amount, traveling all over the place. And now you're confined to a wheelchair. Very difficult to get around. The harbatzes HaTorah was diminished tremendously. How are you so besimcha? And the mashkiach answered him, Al pi Hashem Yiso, Al pi Hashem Yachanu. When the Eibishter wants me to be Yiso, then I go. When he wants to be Yachanu, then I'm Yachanu. Such a pashtus, of course. But he lived that way. He lived that way because he had such a menuchas hanefesh in Lebanon. Maybe we'll close with just sort of one picture, one blick of the Lebanon from the Mashgiach Zatzal. The Mishnah in the beginning of Masechtas Avos tells us, "Have a mesunim badin, ve'amidu talmidim harbe, ve'asu sayog l'Torah." A lot of Mishnayos and Avos we know. Sometimes you have to dreizich who it's talking about, a Rebbe, a Talmud, people. It's, of course, there's pshatim on many different levels. But the Pashtus says this Mishnah is talking about to a person who's a dayan, a person who's a Rebbe. Hamidu Talmidim Arbe. And that was the Mashiach Zatzal's life. It was Mesunim Badin. He took everything. Let's see what it is. Let's messed us up. Let's tighten it up. What is it? A simple dugma. Almost embarrassing a little bit. I was once dealing with an issue. I needed a yeshua. Many years ago, I needed a yeshua for something. I saw an advertisement that they're selling kisvei chasam sefer. Some people have them. They save them over years, and when they have to make chassid, they sell them. So I saw an advertisement, and it says, Mamish, a segul in the floor, you have tremendous seguls. I said, okay, it's a few $1,000s, but maybe it's kedai. So I called up the mashgiach. I said, Mashgiach, I see this thing, I need this issue. Maybe I should do that. I'm an einikel to some safe. So maybe I should, say, he said, tell me, what is it a school for? Oh, I didn't think about that, Taka. You know, you get so carried away. Does it say what it's a school for? Is it for the Indian that you need it for? He had just a way of zeroing in on things to see what is it. He was mesunim badin. The Meruch HaSanefesh was mesunim badin, a day for everyone gained from its eitzah v'sushiyah. V'amidu talmidim Arabi, he wasn't just malamed talmidim. He wasn't malamed talmidim, just to give over shmuzin. He was maimed talmidim. As Rabbi Blazer mentioned, he was very demanding in his shmuzin, very demanding, but he put things over here, he put it up, and he showed us, he says, that's where you can be. That's where you should be. And we wanted to be there. He was maimed talmidim. He brought us up. He says, that's where you can be. And then B'Seif Yomov, he saw that there's a pirza. There's a pirza in Klal Yisrael. And it needed to be blocked, and it needed to be fenced up. Va'asu sayog l'teira. Va'asu sayog l'teira, he went and he made that sayog, he made that fence. And for the last 12 years of his life, and as we know, it's very famous, it says a custom sein Leben. Everybody knows that already. It's famous. He knew he's starting up with the sun's going to start back with him. And he knew that until he got worse and worse. But that was a quick overview. It was Masuna Badin, Memuda Talmid Harbe, and Vasu Siag L'Teira. Just end with one Maisa from Tavshin Ayin Vov. A few years back, went to visit, standing in his office, and on the wall in the office, someone made him a big picture of the Cityfield event. You see the whole crowd over there with the grass field in the middle and the center. And I didn't say anything. And Mashiach looks, he says, I was at that event, and I'm looking at the field, and in my mind there was no doubt that a helicopter was going to come down and out would come Mashiach. Mashiach was also a mensch. He also felt so many people came together for just to be loichem, to make a Kiddush Hashem. He thought that's what it'd be. I said, Rebbe, why not Taka? Stabishter felt there wasn't the time yet. Mitzvah Hashem, we should be zeicher to that time very soon, to be able to be Mekabel today. Mashiach Tzidkeinu, B'mehera v'yameinu, Amen.